Hello and welcome into the Sporting Pod. Along with Tony Allegretti and Mauricio Ruiz, I'm Cole Pepper. Today on the pod, huge news from the USL, a move to a first division. We look at the restart of the USL Super League, and Tony gets sentimental over the last match against Liverpool at Goodison Park for his favorite Everton. We are fed by the Bearded Pig, locally owned and operated, with the locations in San Marco and Jax Beach. Make sure you swing by the Bearded Pig for great barbecue and great times. All right, we had to, on this podcast, we seek to take you behind the scenes of what is happening with Sporting JAX. Let me take you behind the scenes of what's happening with the Sporting Pod. We had a nice show all set up, ready for you. I thought it was going to be a good, solid show. A couple of interesting things.
Yeah.
Tony
as far as they go.
As far as they go. Yeah. Nothing like the best episode ever from a couple of weeks ago, but I thought we had some good stuff. And then, this morning, before we made our way into the studios at Gemstone Media to record the podcast, huge, huge news coming. Our friend Paul Tenorio, now the writer, lead soccer writer for The Athletic, put out the story that the USL
Athletic / New York Times,
which is a New York Times property.
Yeah, sorry.
But yeah, The Athletic, is the larger,
in the M&A. Okay.
Yeah. Put out the story that the USL is going to launch a first division soccer league. I haven't seen it written. I'm assuming it's going to be USL Premier because you have Championship and League One.
You would think
that are in line with the naming,
right? And League Two,
right? But in terms of the same professional, same naming rights or naming approach as it is for in England.
Mm-hmm.
So they're set to launch the new division with the aim, and I'm going to quote Paul Tenorio's article here, with the aim of expanding its presence in the U.S. and increasing the availability of top-tier soccer across the continent. As you all know, the USL Championship is currently the top tier in the USL ecosystem. It is a second division league. MLS is a first division league, and it is a closed system in the MLS environment. So this would be a 12 or 14 team first division. They'd like to get it up and running. Again, I'm going to quote a date here, and we can discuss this. And if you guys have some more insight into this than I do, share. Up and running in 2027-28. So does that mean a move to a fall to spring year, or does it mean to launch it in either 27 or 28 and keep with the spring to fall calendar that USL currently is playing in?
I think the league did say later in the article that we're keeping the current now.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the one differentiator from kind of the model of other the other models around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. MLS has talked about potentially moving to a fall to spring calendar, by the way.
Recently.
Has not yet happened, but that conversation has been out there. But Mauricio, this is massive news. We'll get into the weeds here a little bit on this, but this is an enormous declaration from the USL.
It is, and I think it's well timed. The season's about to start. It brings a lot of eyes into the league and a lot of interest. We've seen this explosion of interest of teams coming into League One, and now you understand why there's been a slowdown the last year or so with Championship franchises launching and more League One teams launching. I mean, there's only going to be, there's going to be 5 League One teams launching this year, and then there's still like the 5 or 7 more in 2026. So you would have to imagine that those conversations with interested parties and investors, as they're talking about what the next 5 years of the USL ecosystem will look like, it makes a lot of sense to come in at the League One level, grow that league, because what's naturally going to happen, the championship teams that want to operate at a League One level will have the opportunity to go into the Premier League, and then League One teams will be able to promote to championship and so forth and so on. So it's well timed, and then you have the World Cup coming up in about a year and a half. So you have to kind of get going before that huge explosion to really try to gain any track in what's going to be all eyes on U.S. soccer.
And I'm glad you brought up the World Cup, because if the first of these 2 years that were mentioned in the article as the target date to launch 2027 is the case, it would be the first season after the World Cup is played in the United States as well as Mexico and Canada. But a lot of attention is going to be paid to the game at that time. And there's been a lot of talk about how do you best utilize the World Cup as a launch point to take soccer in this country to the next level. The last time the World Cup was held in the United States, the launch point was basically MLS was created.
Yeah.
You have to have a pro
right.
league, the MLS 1.0. A lot of change since then in the league, certainly, but it got professional soccer back in the United States after the NASL had petered out in the Pele days. But Tony, this is the question now, and again, I have some details we want to get into, is how might this impact Sporting JAX in that USL ecosystem?
Well, it really kind of depends on where we come in, right? So we've been focusing on championship. We've known some things like it's not a huge shock that the USL has been working on this.
Right.
In fact, I think we've
talked about it on the pod
a little bit. Yeah. So we know we're going to come in at least championship. Mm-hmm. We have been always talking about our 15,000 seat stadium, mm-hmm. and there's lots of different thresholds that helps with. One is Division I, so we've always kind of liked that. But the other is some of the national team games, especially women's national team. You can do a 15,000, and there's expandable, so we can literally do much more. So I would, this is. I want to say a bit of a blinder by the USL because they, even though we've sort of socialized it and workshopped it, and I'm not in the president's meeting, so I can't speak to what has been really kind of widely distributed, but everybody has been, I think, in the ecosystem USL right now, hoping and preparing for this. So I think they've really nailed it by talking to U.S. Soccer first, really kind of going through how it would work and setting it up. I think it's not for me to say, and it's not today to say where we would come in, mm-hmm. but I think the preparation that we've been doing all along is in hopes that we would have promotion and relegation. I think that I speak for every true soccer fan in the United States that we would hope and pray for promotion and relegation in this country. And today is a historic day, and when it finally does happen, it thrills me that somewhere we'll be in that system.
All right, and ProRel is sort of assumed in this, but it wasn't talked about as it being a part of things right away, but sort of a movement to that. So let me get into the weeds a little bit on U.S. Soccer. The Pro League standards, the PLS of U.S. Soccer, is different than it is in a lot of countries because of the top-down nature of how professional soccer since MLS has developed. But here are the requirements for First Division outfits. You have to have at least 12 teams located across the Eastern, Central, and Pacific time zones. Eastern, Central shouldn't be a problem. There are plenty of teams on the West Coast as well. They leave out Mountain Time, by the way, because of the relatively few number of major metropolitan areas in Mountain Time. Obviously, Denver kind of leads that. I think Albuquerque is in Mountain Time, if I'm not mistaken, as well. But you have some different options there. Mountain Time doesn't come into play. At least 75% of the teams playing in a metropolitan market of at least 1 million people. Mm-hmm. So Jacksonville and larger. Yeah. Metro, I think, in Jacksonville right now is 1.3 mm-hmm. in the DMA. So plenty of teams in the USL. Most of the teams in the USL championship right now would qualify under that. You talked about Miami and Tampa and Indianapolis and Louisville and Orange County.
Right.
Go on and on. Sacramento, I believe, would qualify for that as well.
I mean, it's probably easier to say the ones that we know aren't.
Yeah, Charleston.
Yeah, Lexington, maybe.
Lexington, yeah.
Yeah.
Have to think about the other ones, but I don't think that would be a problem. All league stadiums, as you mentioned, Tony, must be enclosed, not with a roof, but seating all around, and with a not where you just walk into it.
Right.
With at least a capacity of 15,000. The league must also meet several levels of financial viability, including ownership groups that can demonstrate the financial capability to operate a team for 5 years. That's important. A first division league must also have a broadcast contract, already done right now with USL Championship, full-time staff for each club, and a full-time league operations staff. No issues there. That's already done. Here is what USL President Paul McDonough said, meeting with U.S. Soccer to go over the plans. He said that at this stage, there's no pushback from U.S. Soccer. We shared our plan, our vision with them. They were very good and asked what they could do to help. So we will see how this all plays out. We know U.S. Soccer was very open to USL Super League once it was realized that the Super League was going to meet the women's Pro League standards for first tier. And granted that. That's why USL Super League is now first division, in addition to the NWSL, which has been pre-existing. But I look at this and I think, all right, and think about the impact that this could have, not only on what the broadcast package might wind up being, but what it might look like and how exciting it would be to have Pro-Rel in the USL structure. Now, there are some things I want to get into. Mao, you and I talked a little bit about this last year when Luton went up to the Premier League. Tiny little stadium, tiny little burg. Others have done this as well. It's difficult to compete and stay up in the Premier League. Now, there's a lot more money and a lot more difference between the top 5 or 6 clubs and the bottom clubs with that. But let's just play a little what if, Mao. What if Jacksonville comes in the championship, earns their way up to the Premier, then you're talking about a pretty substantial change in the structure and the focus on things.
Well, it's interesting, because we're talking about being well timed as well. I wonder if they were waiting to play this card after the legal case with U.S. Soccer and then NSL last week kind of played out, because that would have had some contributing factors to the direction that this all would go. Because ultimately it was, in layman's terms, it was a denial of opportunity for players and leagues to play in the collusion of U.S. Soccer with MLS. So probably a really well played card at the time, because now, as we talked about last week on the TV show, now U.S. Soccer has to be really delicate in how they address lower leagues and lower divisions, or now the opportunity to actually have a second Premier League or second first tier league on the men's side. They have to really show support, because they just came out unscathed from the previous, which sounded like it was a lot of just bad lawyering from the NSL side, because there was obviously some type of conflict of interest that was happening between USL, US Soccer, and MLS. So that's one point there on kind of just the timing of this entire announcement, which I think is a really well played hand by the USL and Paul McDonough and everyone else associated with it.
Yeah, McDonough, by the way, I should say, said that the court decision did not impact USL's strategy to push for a top flight league. The timing of it might have been, again, the strategy was probably happening. But to your point, the timing of it is
no, I think he kind of infers that I inferred, he implied the air needed to clear.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I mean. I think that the timing of it, right. I don't think he had anything to do with whether they're going to go forward with it or not. But certainly the timing of it, makes a lot of sense. How it impacts, teams going forward. I think there's a huge emphasis on making sure that teams that are starting up like Sporting JAX, or teams that maybe have not invested a lot because of just the safety of staying in the championship league. I think you can see that across, all sports, all American sports, when they're not going to get there and they actually get rewarded by a higher draft pick. Where now not making a playoff and being a bottom 4, that race for the bottom, or if Sporting JAX were to come in and not compete right away, and as Tony, you're talking about, the plan is to have a 50,000 seat stadium, a new team in a new metro area, Now all of a sudden you tank your first year, which it's sport. Anything could happen. That makes that product in year 1, year 2 significantly less investable, less attractable. It's not as great of a purchase. So it puts onus on the club, new franchises, because you don't want to join and have the excitement of year 1, because you can only capitalize on that excitement one time in the same way. And all of a sudden, year 2, get dropped down and then try to capitalize on excitement again of being promoted again. It's a yo-yo effect that you want to avoid that. And if it's anything going to be like it is in the Premier League, you really want to kind of get the balloon payout of staying in the top division consecutive years rather than yo-yo your way back in or out. So not just Sporting JAX, but teams that really haven't done a great job of investing in their product. I think they're on the clock to make sure that they find suitable owners and investors that are going to make sure that they're either moving up or at least staying where they are.
Yeah, I think that the knockoff effects of a lot of this will be the real win for USL, right? So we have all those advantages that we love, which is, no player cap, no draft, no, it's a really, instead of centralized ownership, it's individual teams are owned, which makes the transfer window more meaningful and easier, et cetera. The one thing that they didn't have, that the USL did not have, was that first tier cachet.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is it's a massive win, but it also, I think, all those advantages in the open system and the more world, sort of league setup, are going to really be accentuated by this.
All right, we'll have more on this for sure coming up. We'll touch on it on TV here on Saturday. We're going to effort to get some folks to talk about this on the record for us coming up in next week on radio, TV, and on the podcast. But this is massive news. Once again, the USL announcing that a formation of a 12 to 14 team league that will petition for first division status in U.S. soccer is coming in 2027-2028.
One last just note on this is I'm really interested to see if we're going to be the first podcast to talk about this. So the pressure's on to get this up.
All right. Well, so Chris, who is producing
he's
this,
amazing.
we'll get it out there and we'll get this out as soon as we possibly can.
No pressure.
No pressure. All right, season tickets are now on sale for the USL Super League 2025-2026 season. Season tickets start as low as $10 per game for students, $12 per game for supporters, and $15 for general admission. There's also reserve, premium, and field side seating available. Join the movement by securing your 2025-2026 season tickets today and receive a limited edition inaugural season scarf. This exclusive offer won't last long. Act fast and be a part of history and her story at sportingjax.com/tickets. All right, speaking of the USL Super League, gentlemen, the league restarted on Saturday, a 2-2 draw between Tampa Bay Sun and Fort Lauderdale United. It went down to the final minutes before, after Tampa Bay had fallen behind, they scored one and then a second PK to gain the point.
Morshea looks to preserve the advantage. Nielsen strikes it. Morshea can't get a piece. Nielsen scores and ties the tally at 2 in the 95th minute.
95th minute for the PK and the score. It was clearly a penalty by there. No doubt about it. 1-1 draw between Tampa Bay and Fort Lauderdale. This was the game that was lost, Tony, during Hurricane Milton. They were able to get this started. Both getting a point means that Fort Lauderdale went up to third in the table. Remember, the top four qualify for the postseason. But everybody now with 14 more games remaining as the inaugural season has officially now hit the halfway point.
Yeah, and what a great first half of a season. And I'm really excited. Fort Lauderdale is about to play at the end of the month. They're going to play the Gotham in the NWSL. So we're talking about two premier or top tier Division I teams from different leagues. I can't wait to see how that goes. Now,
one at midseason, one in preseason.
Yeah, Gotham's pretty good.
Yep.
So
we'll see how that all plays out.
Yeah, it might be difficult.
Fort Lauderdale United, by the way, also Mauricio announcing that they are playing in USL
Two.
No,
W.
W.
And two.
And two
Yeah.
coming
and
in.
two, yeah.
So That'll I think enhance the rivalry. Also this week with the divisions being aligned for USLW and USL League 2, Sporting JAX will have those pre-professional teams playing in each of those leagues. Great opportunity to kind of see what you might see in the future out of Sporting JAX on the first team.
Well, that's going to be the fun part of it. Now you're actually playing for the as a representation of the first team. And I think you're going to see more of that across the country, but certainly here in Florida, we're going to see a little bit more of it. There's still a lot of pro teams that haven't really established the entire pathway the way that we have. They've kind of picked they've had their choice of how they're going to do the youth development. But more and more, whether they build from within or they partner with a local club, similar to what we did with Florida League, you're going to see more of that pathway being built over time, which is really one of the goals for the USL anyways. So having those rivalries at the under 23 level, and then eventually even at the younger age group levels, it's going to be something that it's only going to help the league and the promotional players.
All right, Sporting JAX, we mentioned TV and radio. Just as a reminder, you can catch the Sporting JAX report Saturdays at noon on NBC 12 right before Premier League coverage. And then every Tuesday at 6 p.m., the Sporting JAX Soccer Hour on 1010XL. You can also listen on demand at 1010XL.com. That's on the AM side, by the way, if you're listening over terrestrial radio. All right, Premier League talk. Let's first look back before we look forward. This past week on Wednesday, the final Merseyside Derby at Goodison Park played between Everton and Liverpool, and here's how it ended.
Harrison is closed down. Mikolenko's on the overlap. Lofted in by Mikolenko. Irabunan to
Listen to that crowd.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Goosebumps. Tony, as many of you know, is Everton is his Premier League club. What was it like watching that?
Yeah, well, very stressful. And, we were always in it, but, you get down and it's really getting close. And I know they're just sort of the psyche of Everton fan. No one left. No one left that game. But, you really sometimes you feel like as an Everton fan, as a Blue, you feel like you don't get the lucky bounce. You don't, things just kind of don't go your way. I think Roger with Men in Blazers is a pretty good sort of narrator to that lifestyle. But every now and then things happen, and that happened, and to be honest, and I got to watch it with a Liverpool fan that works in the office.
Very magnanimous of you.
Yeah, shall remain nameless to not rub it in. But it was good. We still have one more derby this year, so I'm not gonna get too crazy about it. I will say that the sort of idolization of the kid who ran over to get in the fight because we were taunting their away fans. That wasn't even a fight. The dude pulled his shirt. I mean, I get it, and I'm I obviously support you supporting your club and your chance, but it's just a little over.
Was that Curtis Jones? Curtis Jones? Is that who it was?
Yeah,
he got the yellow card.
It was the only scouser.
Curtis Jones.
Yeah. I don't know. It was just a little kind of slap boxing kind of thing. But anyway, I just show, and apparently Decoria was doing that because he got some racist abuse, which the cops are looking into and all that. But anyway, I'm happy for it. We play again.
98th minute equalizer, and you would have thought that was for the championship with the way that Goodison exploded there, Mauricio.
Well, with everything on the line and the way that the game started, with my my good friend Beto, right, Tony? You've been hyping up all year long. I mean, what a great start to the game. We couldn't have asked for more. Unfortunately, it was short-lived with a goal, the header minutes, from the shortest guy on the field.
Yeah,
McAllister, heck of a header too.
I mean, he was. I mean, and Pickett looked like he's dropping on his knees to go right after that ball. But then you got Mo Salah doing what Mo Salah has done this season, which is outside of the Merseyside Derby, it's been absolutely incredible to see him continue to break records with goals, and he's gonna go down as probably, and I don't know, I'm not a historian, but if not the top 3 Liverpool player of all time. And he scored a lot in his derbies too, which kind of think just elevates his status. And if they win the league this year, so short-lived for Everton, and there's a little deflated. There's some good physicality to the game. I'm not a huge fan of necessarily of Tim Howard, but I don't know if you got to see his comments after the game where he said, they're not enticing violence, but he was happy to see that the derby still ment something.
By the way, I'm sitting here across from Tony as Mauricio was pumping up Mo Salah and talking about it. Tony is just bent into a pretzel right now emotionally.
Mo Salah's a hell of a player. He's doing things this year like it's a contract year, and so to I think what you're saying about Tim Howard's point, we've had like a something like a $30 million net spend in like the last 5 years, like the second lowest in the whole pyramid. We are, and then Njai goes out. Skilliman is like our best player. Like we are. We define scrappy right now, and I think if we didn't run into the buzzsaw that is Bournemouth, and they are. They're flying, and so this would have been, just another one. We got to recover and get healthy, and hopefully finish out the season.
Well, and I will also point out that this win or this draw that gets a point.
It's a 2-2 win.
It's right. I was going to say it's got to feel like a victory because of the circumstances and the timing and everything else. It also gets Everton to 27 points, which is the same as Spurs and West Ham, and that is it gives them a little bit of breathing room right now. Leicester is 18th. They are the top team that is in the relegation zone. So you get 10 points clear there with 10 games remaining. So with 14 games remaining rather. So we'll see how that all plays out. But a point there kind of feels like more than just a point.
Yeah, well, again, historically, so last year when we beat them at home for the first time in freaking forever, I don't know, way long, we sang you lost the league at Goodison Park, right? And because we were up like 2-0 or whatever. So this year, at the end of the match, their fans were singing, "We won the league at Goodison Park," and then we literally scored when they were singing that. So it's the beauty of the game. This is why we got to grow the game.
That's what a rivalry is all about.
That's
what it really is. All right, let's look ahead. Which match are you looking forward to the most coming up here this weekend? I'm going to go first, and I will go with Spurs Man U on Sunday, 11:30 on Peacock. This is 14th in the table against 13th in the table. Spurs just snapped a 4-game losing streak and a 7-game winless stretch. United have won just 3 times in 11. I don't think either one of these clubs is in danger of relegation, but they are in danger of massive change coming again, as it would be for Man U, if they wind up sneaking down there around 16th, 17th in the table. Mal?
Well, I'm going to go with City, Newcastle. They're right there. They're 5th and 6th back to back. City has a lot to prove. They just lost to Real Madrid at home in the Champions League over the midweek. My second game will be Fulham, Nottingham Forest, just because that's just a fun game to watch. To be honest, 2 teams that are just playing forward, and obviously Nottingham Forest, everyone's watching what they're doing. But as far as what's on the line in Champions League positioning, and Man City and Newcastle should be a heck of a game.
Tony?
Yeah, so I'm going Arsenal. You would not think of this as a marquee matchup to go into Leicester. My thought on this is it's an absolute must-win for Arsenal, right? They've got this semi-door. The door's cracked, not really open, but they've got this crack. And Leicester, you would think they could handle. If they don't win this, you got to really wonder, because this is the opportunity. 14
straight undefeated for Arsenal. They haven't lost a match since November the 2nd, and they've won 3 of their last 4. So as you mentioned, with Liverpool, now everybody's level in terms of games played. They've got to clear. Liverpool, by the way, has Wolves. So again, you would expect, unless there's a Goodison hangover, that they would take care of business.
They do have
there.
some red cards to deal with.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
So
we'll see. All right, boy, so much to talk about. Again, we will have more on this massive announcement from the USL about a first division coming up in the coming weeks, and the impact it's going to have on soccer in Jacksonville as well. For Mauricio Ruiz and Tony Allegretti, I'm Cole Pepper. Thanks so much for listening to The Sporting Pod.